In a fast-moving world, we increasingly expect things to happen fast, faster, now. Press a button, out pops the coffee. Like a song, and it's on your phone in 4 clicks. Have a baby, and the only thing preventing you posting a picture of the child within 90 seconds of the birth on Facebook and on Instagram is the fact that the midwife has not yet weighed the little cherub. We're used to getting things instantly, and that can breed impatience. And when it comes to the Christian life, we can burden ourselves with similar expectations. I became a Christian yesterday. How come I'm still a little short-tempered? You know, I've prayed for my work colleague 7 days in a row. How come they haven't become a Christian? Well, fruit takes time to ripen. As we come to the end of this series, I hope that you've seen fruit on your front line. Hope you've seen ways in which God has worked through you in the past, seen ways in which God is working through you right now. I hope that you've already got some stories to tell of how God has been at work. But of course, sometimes fruit takes a long time to ripen. Let me tell you a story. Claire had been working as an administrator in a doctor's surgery for 13 years. But the last 6 months had been particularly special. As she put it, it was as if God had entered the building. One of the doctors, who was from a Hindu background, had been ill, and she offered to pray for him. And he got better. He must have told one of the other doctors, because she came along to Claire and asked her to pray for her family, which of course she did. And then she invited 5 of her colleagues to an Alpha course in her church, and all 5 came, and all 5 became Christians. And then the female GP was ill herself, and one day she came up to Claire and said, "Would you pray for me?" It was the end of the day, and Claire was actually about to leave. "What, now?" said Claire. "Yes, now." So she put down her bag in the middle of the office, and she prayed for the doctor right there and then, in front of 2 other colleagues who were working. It's a fantastic story. It's a fantastic story. But it's really only a bit of the story. Claire, before that extraordinary 6 months, had been working in that doctor's surgery as an administrator for 12.5 years. And there'd been a lot of good fruit along the way. Claire had prayed all those years. She'd sought to care for colleagues. She'd shared how she was growing as a young Christian all those years. She sought to create a good atmosphere, a kind atmosphere in the surgery. She tried to be patient with people who were struggling with pain, with disability, with suffering, with loss, struggling sometimes just to hear clearly, struggling sometimes to understand some form. And over those years, well, quite a lot had changed for Claire. She got engaged, she got married, she had a son, and then she got divorced. On the other hand, not much seemed to have changed in her colleagues' relationship with Jesus, though a number of them did comment positively on the changes they'd seen in her through those years, through thick and thin. They'd caught a glimpse of what it might mean to walk with Jesus through thick and thin. So Claire had done good work. Claire had modelled godly character. She'd extended grace and love. She'd created a context in that doctor's surgery of kindness, not just efficiency. Praise God for all of it. Fantastic fruit. Fantastic fruit. And then in that last 6 months, a lot of other good fruit. People being healed. People becoming Christians. Why then? Well, as Claire put it, God had been working in me and through me all those years. I just think it was God's timing. It was just God's timing. God had been in the building throughout those 13 years. God had been working in and through Claire throughout those 13 years. God had been working in her colleagues throughout those 13 years. Different fruit, ripening at different times. Of course, on our front lines, we may not get to see how one fruit leads to another. We may move away, or the person we're praying for may move away. We start an initiative, but we don't get to see how it grows. We don't get to see the end of the story. But God is at work. We trust Him, and He chooses to trust us. We're not actually in control of our own fruitfulness, are we? It's not something we can manufacture. We can't stick ourselves in the spiritual greenhouse or pop ourselves in a grow bag or pour on the baby bio and just hope for a bumper crop. Jesus does it. He's the vine, we're the branches. We can't make ourselves loving, but we can ask Jesus to help us love. We can't make other people become Christians, but we can ask Jesus to show us how He wants us to contribute. Break up the ground, pull up the weeds, plant the seed, water, and leave Him to do what only He can do. Give life. We trust Him, and God chooses to trust us. Let me tell you about the head teacher of a primary school. We'll call her Judith. On a very cold February Monday, Judith turned up at work to discover that the heating had broken and several hundred small children were about to arrive. That's how her day began. And her day ended with a very angry child making things very difficult. A troublesome child who'd been troublesome rather too often before. And so, reluctantly, Judith had to exclude him. It's not something any head likes to do. That was how her day ended. Not the bestest of days on her front line. But when she got home, after what was really rather a grim day, after a day when she might well have been justified in having a mega whinge, or soothing herself with a glass or two of medicinal wine, or a huge tub of quadruple chocolate ice cream, something strange happened. As she put it, I found myself thanking God for trusting me with all that. It was for her a completely different way of seeing her front line. God trusted her with it, as God trusted Moses with the Israelites. These were the people God had given her to love. These were the challenges He was expecting her to handle with Him. God is trusting us with our front line, trusting us to be His people there, trusting us with the people there, trusting us with the challenges, trusting us with the tasks. And we are not alone. There's a marvelous moment in the life of Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 6. The king of Aram has realized that the reason his surprise attacks on Israel are all failing is not because Israel has planted a spy in his court or a bug in his palace, but because God is listening into his plans. And it's God who's telling Elisha, and Elisha who's warning the king of Israel. So the king of Aram, recognizing that his security systems can't stop God listening in, decides to try to capture Elisha. He fails several times. Finally, he tracks Elisha down to the city of Dothan, and he sends his troops to surround the city. Here's what happens. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. I can't promise you horses or chariots of fire, but God, the King of the universe, does promise to be with us, and that makes all the difference in the world. God surely is at work on your front line, surely wants to teach you things there. The Lord surely does have a role for you there. surely wants you to be a blessing there. So, as this series comes to an end, do think about how, as a group, you might help one another to be fruitful on your front lines over the long haul. Perhaps you want to continue to pray each week for someone else's front line, for them, for a task they've got to do, a change they'd really like to see, a person in particular need, or a particular person's salvation. Perhaps once every 3 months or so, you might want to go over the M's as a way of reflecting on what God might have been doing, a kind of 6 MOT, as a way of encouraging one another, as a moment to give praise and thanks, as well as to pray. Perhaps you've thought of lots of different things you might do to bless your front line, but you probably can't do it all. Develop deep relationships with everyone. Have a gospel-rich conversation with every person you encounter. Root out every smidgen of injustice and untruth and transform the culture into a new Eden. You can't do it all. For freedom, Christ has set us free. For purposeful, Spirit-led fellowship with Him in His service, not for self-driven, guilt-tinged, anxious hyperactivity. I wonder, what is God stirring in you? It may be to focus on a particular person or a particular issue. Maybe you aren't sure, so maybe like Peter the litter picker, you simply want to ask, Lord, what do you want me to do? It might be a tiny thing, a mustard seed, so small you can hardly see it. But a mustard seed grows. So, wherever your front line, whatever you do, whoever you're with, the Lord be with you. The Lord be with you.